We are on the line this morning with U.S. Attorney Scott Brady from Pittsburgh, and our conversation brought to you by Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. We know he's a big Buccos fan, but he still has to pay attention to the job, even while he's looking across the river there at PNC Park to catch a glimpse of the Buccos working out. Scott, good morning.
Hey, Todd. How are you? Great to be with you.
Well, that's good. It's good to have you with us here today on this Friday morning. Scott, I wanted to talk to you about, we think in the pandemic era that the world might be coming to a stop and only dealing with that. But there are things that still have to go on. And one of the most important things is keeping our neighborhoods clean and safe. And that involves frequently and unfortunately drug dealerships and folks who are walking on the other side of the line. And last week, an announcement of some indictments against people here in Indiana and in Philadelphia, one of those Philadelphia to Indiana drug pipelines. Those investigations are so key for our neighborhoods, and I know that it takes an awful lot of work. Talk, if you would, about that particular investigation and how that went down.
Sure. No, absolutely. And sadly, you're right, Todd. Drug cartels and their drug organizations that are in our area in Western PA and throughout the country have slowed down during the pandemic, especially where you've seen a lot of interstate traffic between source cities like Philadelphia and Newark or Detroit and Cleveland. Thankfully, the men and women of law enforcement continue to work hard, and that includes our federal agencies. As you know, last time we talked, we were talking about our partnership with Bob Manzi. We're working closely with Greg Neugebauer in Cambria County and Ryan Sayer in Clearfield County. Mm-hmm. And I think what we're realizing is that, no great secret, we protect our communities best when we are working together, state, federal, local. We're blessed in Western PA not to have the turf battles that you see in a lot of areas around the country. We all just want to grab an oar and row in the same direction and accomplish the same mission. So the indictment that we announced was in partnership with District Attorney Manzi and his drug task force. We had a wiretap investigation of an organization that was trafficking everything. We call them poly-drug DTOs, drug trafficking organizations. They were selling crack cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl. It was based out of Philadelphia, and you had traffic and people who had set up shop in Indiana. And so the investigation kind of expanded what was known and what was being watched by the Indiana Police Department and the Pennsylvania State Police. And then we were able to bring some federal resources in, because when we attack these organizations, we want to pull them out by their root, not just play whack-a-mole with a handful of people in a certain area. Mm-hmm. And so this was a great success, a great investigation, and we really couldn't have done it without Bob and his drug task force.
One of the things you mentioned was, of course, we know the Philadelphia connection is long-standing here. So there's a Detroit connection for this region as well for a very long time. Drug organizations, they can not only be statewide, but they can be across state lines. They can even be international, reaching into our communities.
That's absolutely right. And that's what we saw with, I know we had talked about the investigation and prosecution we had in Clearfield County as well. So around the same time that we indicted the Indiana organization, we prosecuted a 38-person organization that was bringing Mexican cartel meth from Atlanta to Erie to Clearfield County. And again, we took down that entire organization, very successful. But that's what we're seeing. We're not seeing the old patterns, the kinds of drugs being localized. This is an international business. The cartels have distribution networks throughout the United States, and the gangs that support them from some of the bigger cities, they come across Interstate 80, they come across 76, and they try to figure out where can we set up shop, and where can we avoid being noticed by federal law enforcement. And so a lot of times they'll go to smaller counties and smaller communities. Todd, I'm from the Mon Valley, but I grew up in Mercer County. My wife's from Mercer County, yeah. Sharon and Farrell. The gangs from Detroit and Cleveland come, and they set up shop there, and then they go across Interstate 80 all the way out to Clearfield. So that's where the partnerships with our district attorneys are so important, because they're doing fantastic work, but the tools that they have legally are limited to within their jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And we can go across state lines, we can go internationally. And so that's the drug organizations and gangs, they know that. They know the counties that we're working together in, and that's what we want. We want them to keep going on Interstate 80, go farther east in Pennsylvania, go into Ohio, go on 76, go past Indiana, go past Cambria and Blair, just stay out of Western PA, and that partnership helps send that message pretty clearly, I think, to the gangs and to the cartels.
Yeah, absolutely does. And that local connection, working with the federal connection, is so important. Take me inside one of these investigations at its origins. When you learn of an operation going on, obviously you have to work in coordination with local drug agencies and really come up with a plan of attack, do you not?
That's right. And that's why having those partnerships and those open channels of communication are so important, because they can start a lot of different ways. We might do an interception of someone coming across the turnpike and get a multi-kilo shipment or load that's destined for someplace. We'll arrest them and sometimes flip those person and get their cooperation on the spot and do what we call a controlled delivery. The great thing about the federal system is, our mandate is different. We go after the worst of the worst. And so the people that we have in federal prison are really bad guys, right? They're the biggest drug organizations and drug dealers in our region and in our country. And so the mandatory minimums you hear a lot about, and there's an important public policy discussion going on about those, but they're useful tools for law enforcement, because sometimes drug dealers see a 1, 2, maybe even a 5-year prison sentence as almost a cost of doing business. And if they get that in the state system, they're willing to take that hit, but they won't cooperate against their organization. Federally, with the quantities of the organizations that we're looking at that they're dealing in, then they're looking at a 10, 15, 20-year mandatory minimum. And we don't have bail and we don't have parole. And so their posture with respect to law enforcement and their willingness to cooperate completely changes. So again, it can start a lot of ways. Sometimes it is a local investigation that they realize is going out of state. They call us, and then we sit down together and we create a plan of attack. And it might be with the state police. It might be with the Indiana Police Department. The chief there is a great partner of ours. And a lot of times, especially when they're traveling out of state and or international, that's where we use the our full toolkit. And we go up on wiretaps, and we're monitoring phones, text messages, and that's invaluable, because then you can understand what the scope of an organization is. And again, trying to pull it out by its root, you're not just taking off 2 or 3 people in an area. You're going back to Philly or international, and you're prosecuting, 19 or 30 or 40 people.
Yeah. One of the things about these as they unfold that fascinates me most is there's things that happen in offices, but then there have to be things that happen on streets. The men and women who are doing this work on the street, they're taking on some very dangerous work, aren't they?
They absolutely are. We just had another drug organization here in Pittsburgh that we were taking down. Again, it was a wiretap investigation out of state and a local organization. An ATF officer who was a member of a SWAT team. We were executing a search warrant, and he was shot as he entered the building. This is incredibly dangerous work. And it's important to remember, look, this is a tough time for law enforcement. And again, there's an important national discussion going on. But it's important to remember that the men and women of law enforcement are every bit as dedicated to their communities as teachers and nurses and doctors and social workers. They have the added risk, though, of kissing their children and spouse goodbye in the morning. They don't know if they're coming back. And so they've been out every day during the pandemic, every day during the protests and the riots. I don't think we can really support them or thank them enough.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. We're talking with U.S. Attorney Scott Brady for just a few more moments. So people who are sitting in their homes right now and noticing things happening on their streets that might be a bit unusual, What are the steps that they should take in order to, and I know it starts locally, in order to maybe put an end to some really dangerous activities in their hometowns?
I think the most important thing is, as you said, Todd, is call your local police department, right? That they're in your community. They know you. They know the people that are coming in and out. They know the areas and the locations. And again, depending upon where you are, if you're in Indiana, call the Indiana Police Department. If you're out in one of the outlying counties that the Pennsylvania State Police covers, call their barracks and just tell them what's going on. And they will keep your information and your name, private. That's not something that we broadcast. And again, you're not informing on anyone. You're just alerting police to something that's out of the ordinary because you care about the safety of your neighbors and your kids and your loved ones as well. So that's how a lot of these investigations start. They start with a call from a concerned citizen saying, exactly as you said, Todd, something doesn't seem quite right. I don't know what it is, but there's people coming in and out of this one, apartment or building at all hours of the day and night. Yeah. And sometimes that's all it takes to get a really good investigation going.
And we need to understand that there are highly trained professionals who do this sort of thing for a living. Don't do anything on your own. Just make the phone call.
Absolutely right. Absolutely.
All right. So there you go. That's our law enforcement conversation with Scott Brady. Now let's fix the Pirates, Scott. We've talked about this in the past.
Well, sadly, I went again undrafted in this year's draft for
Amazing.
30 consecutive years. I was undrafted. I remain a free agent if any major league scouts are listening. But thankfully things are starting to come back to normal. My kids are out on the baseball fields, and I know we all want that desperately. But it'll be nice when we can watch the Pirates start losing again.
Now, Scott.
No, just kidding.
Hey, thank you.
Hope springs eternal.
I'm so glad you're able to carve out some time for us here this morning. I thought it was an important discussion because people need to know that there are men and women out there who are working on their behalf to make sure their communities are clean and safe and beautiful like Indiana is and like Sharon and Farrell and where you come from, where we all live. It's our town, and we need to be sure that it's safe and that troublemakers are not holding sway. Thanks, Scott.
Absolutely. And again, Todd, Bob Manzi is doing a fantastic job, right? We wouldn't be having the success that we're having in taking and dismantling that drug trafficking organization without Bob bringing kind of a new paradigm to how he's enforcing the laws in Indiana. So he's been a great partner, and we're happy that we can do our part to help keep Indiana safe.
All right, Scott, have a great weekend.
All right. Thanks, Todd. You too. Take care.
All right, we'll see you.
Take care.
All right, we'll see you.